Hey everyone, it's Josh from AirOps. I'm joined with Owen. Thank you for joining us for the next edition of the AirOps Growth Leaders Series. Nick LeRoy is joining us. We've been in communication with him, but we're trying to get the panelists figured out here. So please bear with us for a second. If you could, though, go ahead and drop in the chat star or a star if it's your first time, and then a rocket ship if you have been with us before. So star, rocket ship. Let me see those start coming in through the chat. Meg, thank you. There we go. Star, first time. Rocket ship is your second time. Star equals first time. My emoji keyboard has been off. Rocket equals multiple times. All right, really great to see that. Boomer here, how to make a rocket ship. I swear I've been having issues with my keyboard recently. I haven't been having to like go to the menu and figure that out there. But really glad that Nick is with us today. I'm going to go ahead and mention this from the top as we're kind of waiting for him to join us. If you haven't checked out SEO for Lunch, that is his newsletter, the SEO for Lunch newsletter. And he recently relaunched it. Today, I believe, was his like new edition on Substack. And it just has like Nick's take as part of it. And so it's a really great resource to use. There's Nick. We're trying to get you. I haven't had this issue before.
Let's see what we can do. Nick Moore.
Owen is the technical wizard there.
Can you raise your hand in the chat, Nick? There's a little function at the bottom. I think that'll let me get you back in. So weird.
Wait, I see a hand raised. All right, I'm about to promote Nick. Did that work? Nick, are you here? There he comes. Yes, Nick has been promoted. Nick has been promoted to panelist. Welcome, Nick.
Are you able to talk, Nick?
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
There you
I'm
go.
starting my video. Give it a second. There we go.
Oh, perfect.
Hello,
Yeah.
everybody.
More rocket ships from everyone, please, or party emojis that Nick has entered the chat. Nick, how's it going today? Where are you calling from?
You know what? I mean, all the way up until about 2 minutes ago when I couldn't get in, things were fantastic. But you know what? As you could probably see from behind me, I'm calling from the beautiful state of Minnesota and super excited to talk SEO.
Yeah. Thanks for being here today. Good weather in Minnesota today.
You know what? Today is actually, it's beautiful out. So it's supposed to rain for a couple days, I think tomorrow and the next day. So I'll probably get out and about this afternoon, maybe even after this webinar.
Awesome. Well, we are going to talk about SEO trends today and 7 trends that show SEO is far from over. So I know this will be a really cool talk for everyone to participate in. So, but first, before we get into that, why don't you give a little background on yourself and maybe like some of your experience with SEO? I know you own SEO Jobs. We're going to be chatting about that. Also, I was given a plug for your newsletter before we get started. But yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience in SEO?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for having me. I'm Nick LeRoy. I've been in the SEO space for 15 years now. And the first 10 of those were agency side. And then the last 5 to date have been as an independent SEO consultant. As you had mentioned, I own SEOjobs.com. Again, part of the reason that I went out on my own was because I'm not shy in sharing that I've lost my job twice. I know how horrible of an experience it is going through LinkedIn and Indeed trying to find a job. So what better than to get the premium domain and help make life a little bit easier for other people. And then last but not least, as you had said, and it's funny that you had caught it just about an hour ago, I relaunched the SEO for Lunch. So I took 8 years of recap emails that I had been writing every week religiously again for 8 years, and it's gone. Now I'm doing more of a hot take approach. So I think there's a lot that we think and want to talk about, but we are always a little nervous about, what does our boss think? How does this look for, my company? So given that I'm not tied to any one particular brand, I'm willing to say what a lot of us are thinking. And I'm really excited to, push this out.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for being here with us today. So let me set the agenda here a bit. This is some of the trends, and we thank you for some of those folks from Angie, Graphite, Descript who have joined us and have been participating in the series. First, we're going to talk about how SEO jobs are changing, why SEO is not the only game anymore, back to basics, and then who is the king and queen? Are there silver bullets? How do we attribute for all of this? And then maybe some bonus stuff there at the end too. So we're going to kind of have a conversation back and forth, but like let's definitely take it off here. So yeah, SEO jobs are changing. We see a combination of hybrid roles, new positions like content engineers, prompt optimizers, along with enhanced skills. So what are you kind of seeing from your end as you're going through SEO jobs and those postings?
So I would say first and foremost, I'm just going to validate what I think anybody, on this webinar today has already been seeing. The industry is in a really weird situation. We have never been in a spot where SEO talent is outnumbering the demand. And because of that, the industry is hard. Like people are getting laid off. People, are competing against hundreds and thousands of other people for the limited jobs that are out there. And it really is something that we're not used to, admittedly. It was only 2 years ago, I always kind of joke, it was like C+ players were getting paid A+ dollars because that's how it just worked. And before jumping into it more, I think really what it comes down to is there's politics, the economy, and then of course this little thing called AI that all of us love playing with.
Yeah, and let's touch a little bit on this last point here. Are you seeing like new skills being needed? Are you seeing any shifts in like what's being asked for? Or how do you think about the skill set and how maybe we should up level?
So definitely, without a doubt, and this will surprise nobody, the ability to leverage AI or be able to, create prompts that is going to be able to help you scale and gain efficiency is definitely a skill set that's becoming a requirement. There are some titles that have been kind of changing a little bit, for, instead of just being strictly SEO, it's more like organic growth or, even, it's just like engine optimization, with the idea of it being kind of anywhere. But what I will say is fairly consistently now, any role that is published has at least one line item that is specifying, AI knowledge or at least AI curiosity.
Yeah, for sure. And what we're seeing on our end is we always encourage people to like definitely play around and experiment to help level up your skills for that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk a little bit more specifics. How AI overviews are altering clicks. As another trend, I picked this up from Nick Eubanks. I was at SEO Week a couple weeks ago. Nick Eubanks is from SEMrush, also was a creator of like Traffic Think Tank. And I thought this chart just kind of put it very succinctly and clearly. Impressions on the upswing, but clicks on the downswing. Are you seeing something similar from your side?
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm seeing. I have a couple clients that have really put a ton of time and investment into their like editorial, and we're kind of concerned. We're having conversations. I'm trying to set the stage that 2024 may have been the peak of, traffic for that.
Wow.
So absolutely seeing it. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
And what are you kind of advising your clients to do, or what are your suggestions for kind of handling this new environment?
So it's really interesting. I think a lot of SEOs that have been around the block, would say you typically want to take the content you have that's kind of almost performing and spend more resources trying to get them up into a position that's visible. And that has always been the mantra since the day of like SEO. And now it's almost the opposite. We know that we're only capturing, let's just be generous and say 60% of what we used to. We can't do anything to increase that percentage. So what we need to do is create more breadth of content. And that allows us to, potentially get the 60%, from more topics, more trends, etc. On top of that, I think a lot of SEOs are freaking out a little bit because they aren't focusing on getting that organic visibility outside of search. SEO has spent so much time focusing on obviously ranking for Google and taking any of the random clicks that you might get from Bing, and that was kind of the success tied to your individual role. I think we're in a situation now where organic search or organic visibility is well beyond just Google. That includes, the LLMs, but that also includes Yahoo, or sorry, not Yahoo, YouTube is what I'm trying to say here. And just some other, Reddit, it's basically where people are and how are we organically getting them from those platforms to our business.
Yeah, let's go ahead and touch on two things there real quick. Is the first thing you said was more breadth of content. Are you saying like you might need more pages to get like the same level of traffic?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So it literally goes against everything that we kind of like as SEOs have been taught. You never want to just like shotgun blast content. But the reality is that's how you're going to get the volume now.
Yeah, I've been talking about a similar thing as well. That makes a lot of sense to me. And then secondly is I think you had a note here once about like how organic search has to transition, how you have to SEOs need to transition from organic search to organic reach. And so that seems to play into that idea of like, are you on YouTube? Are you on the LLMs? Are you in Reddit? Maybe even like some Bing there too, because I know they have a partnership with Chat GPT.
Yep, absolutely. It's just what you had said. I think a lot of us, myself included, we get stuck by defining our success or failures by going into our analytics platform and then dropping down from the default channel to organic. And that is always defined by search. And I think we're in a world now where we need to better understand that, I use halo effect because most of us understand SEO isn't just the pages that we're creating. It has a much larger impact. And it's really difficult to, measure that. But I think that's where we're going to find success, is this continuing to bridge and, find the opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Let's go to the next one. I really like this idea. Back to the basics again. Maybe the old SEO is the new SEO in some ways. What are you thinking about on this slide?
Yeah, it's funny because there's so much conversation about, is SEO dead? What is the future of SEO? And the reality is it's continuing to shift, but all of those basics are just that much more fundamental for creating a really good foundation for your website and your business. And as you have kind of got laid out here, it's like things like clean HTML, internal linking, structured data. These are all components that we know search engines have used forever. But now that we have more bots crawling our websites, it's more opportunities to make sure that we are essentially optimizing for them as well. And we have to remember, Josh, that Google, what has had 20 plus years now of refining their algorithms and the technology to, work with JavaScript. There's a lot of talk right now about how these LLMs aren't rendering JavaScript. So if your site is especially JavaScript heavy, then you may not get the visibility in ChatGPT or Perplexity that you want.
Yeah, that's a really good note. Are you seeing any like I know people have talked about maybe some schema changes or some different structures. Have you seen any of those change, or is it still kind of using the fundamental schemas from the past?
Yeah, I mean, if what you're asking is like, is there kind of an LLM schema? To my knowledge, there isn't yet. I think it's just more, again, that foundational, how are we taking the primary content of the page and being able to feed it to these bots in the easiest way?
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I was putting some of these in the chat, but trend one, just to recap, is you need some familiarity with AI for your SEO roles. AI overviews are definitely changing things up. 3 right here, back to the basics again. So then let's jump into our 4th one here. Content is king, but distribution is queen. How should we think about distributing our content these days?
I would argue that we should have always been thinking about this way, but distribution has always been kind of a secondary thought for SEO content, if you will.
Yeah.
People would find it a lot easier to kind of shotgun blast, again, the quantity of content, and then just continue to try to pour some gas on the few that rank well. And now that our clicks are being taken away from us, we aren't necessarily or shouldn't be writing for Google anymore, despite the fact that, that's been the mantra since day one. So really, everything that you have listed here, it's how are you creating stuff that we know is going to gain visibility and traction with all of these different, platforms. It's not about necessarily having the right keyword in the headline. It might be stronger call to actions or taking the spicy take. And, that's really where we're at now, because getting more exposure and being able to get kind of some of that virality is what Google is also looking for when they're ranking, all this stuff organically as well.
Yeah, and how are you thinking about citations and LLMs as far as like, and how maybe some of that plays into that?
So I think that it is table stakes now. You're going to have to do that, because right now, as we kind of briefly had touched on, LLMs, they're not sophisticated in the sense of a crawler. How they're training their services, it doesn't have that 20 years plus of what Google's at. It really is, from what we understand today, relying exclusively on citations. And so getting listed on all of these, best SaaS product for content writing, newsletters and blog posts, and even like videos is important, because my understanding is, and it's probably not quite as simple as this, but it's almost just consistency and quantity is how ChatGPT and these LLMs are ranking. But I will say one thing that I have found really, really interesting is some brands that I'm working with have the strongest LLM performance because it correlates to how aggressive they are investing into their affiliate offering. Because again, thinking about how simple these LLMs are, they're looking strictly for citations. They don't care or even necessarily click on those links. So all these affiliate, you go to Forbes and it's the best mattresses, and you got your 5 there. When you have a really strong and enticing affiliate offer, it amplifies your brand and your products and services across the internet almost immediately.
Because your affiliates are posting about your product, is that why?
Exactly.
Okay.
So if I say, what's the best football team, and then I go pay all the NFL writers, to put the Vikings at the top, then, the LLMs don't really understand what is an affiliate link. I'm paying them for that visibility, versus what is natural. It's almost like the early days of buying backlinks for SEO.
That is really fascinating. I haven't heard that from anybody so far in all of my different webinars here. So, I mean, I think that is a really good takeaway, especially if you do have a strong affiliate program. Super interesting. I would also encourage anybody who is interested in this. We did a webinar with Crystal Carter a few weeks ago, and she did this like really good RAP framework, is what you call it, RAPP, like relevance. I forget all of them, but recency, that was it. Because like that recency angle really helps you kind of stay ahead in the LLMs. And so I think about like research, surveys, data as helping with that too.
100%.
Yeah, and then your earned media can kind of help with that too. That's like the digital PR play, right?
Yep. So Josh, that's probably the one part I didn't talk on, because it's probably the most obvious and what people from SEO are used to. But I just had a conversation with a CMO, and we were talking about how, their informational content is down from Google, and he understands that we're not going to potentially get it back. But he asked me, he goes, if you were in my seat, like, where would you invest, not knowing exactly what the size of the prize is for these LLMs? And I told him, I said, I would double whatever you're budgeting for PR, because there's no situation where that is not going to provide value to your company, assuming you have a good brand, product, and service. But I think as a secondary value, we could see a correlation of as your brand gets stronger through more visibility and distribution, I think that's going to have a direct correlation with LLM traffic and visibility as well.
Yeah, maybe on this, we had a question come in that says that they had not found backlinks were a huge factor in LLM mentions. Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I don't have any data to say definitively, but from what I've learned and what I've seen, it doesn't seem like they're really considering the links. And that kind of goes back to that affiliate play that I had mentioned. What they're looking for is consistency. So when we say, what are the best shoes for men that wear size 13? And it says, Nike Air Jordans routinely across the internet. I don't think they're really considering which ones are natural, if you will, and which ones are paid placements. What they're seeing is a consistent model that is saying the best shoes for men size 13 is Nike, Adidas, and Reebok.
Yeah, and maybe I'll add to that a bit too. Digital PR does not necessarily equal backlinks. It does mention like mentions of your product and of your brand, and then having your brand connected to like certain phrases or industries or categories also helps in the LLMs too. So digital PR is not necessarily equal digital backlinks. Meg, if you want to expand on your question a little bit, are you finding that with a specific industry? That would be great. Let's go into the next one real quick here. Trend number 5. Oh, whoops, special announcement. I wanted to mention this up top here. We do have some content refresh strategies with AirOps. It's one of the things that we've seen a lot of success with clients here recently. So Webflow, for instance, they've had 5x more research refreshes this year using AirOps than they had previously. And then they had an immediate 40% uplift in their traffic. This is a new case study that we just published maybe last week. So if you want to learn more about that, definitely hit the QR code right there, or you can go to our website and find the case study, and we'll be dropping those. Yep, we got it in the chat right there. Find some Webflow level results for your team, and I'll be showing you a content refresh workflow at the end of the webinar as well. All right, speaking of AI, I think this is a great way to think about AirOps or any other tool for AI, is that there is no silver bullets here. So what are you kind of thinking on this trend?
Yeah, so first I'll jump in real quick to Meg's question. She's asking if I was seeing these trends in any particular industry. And I would say I almost work exclusively at the enterprise level and B2C. So e-commerce is where I have seen that correlation of building and investing in the affiliate networks and the correlation of, how that type of traffic and visibility is coming from. Great. Going back to this is my biggest pet peeve. Like, I love AI. I know there's the whole politics side of it, but I really believe that it's a tool that's going to allow us to scale and become more efficient. It's not about AI taking over our jobs. The robots aren't going to come after us. But what it's going to do is it's going to hold all of these individuals and practitioners accountable for creative thinking and execution. I have a post that I'm writing. Hopefully I'll share it in the next couple of weeks. But, I just think that we have too many practitioners that are doing checkbox SEO. And the reality is AI can do a lot of that, not only better, but significantly quicker. So if we're going to rely on that to do this type of work, we have to make sure that we stay in control and that we're giving it the direction. But long story short with all that, what I'm trying to say, this is a 1 + 1 = 3. So together it adds more value. And in my experience, a lot of CMOs and CEOs, anyone in the leadership level, is seeing AI as an opportunity to cut resources. They think that's a replacement, and they're chasing profitability. And it's even uglier if they have investors or are a public company, because they, like I said, they just see it as a line item that they feel like they can just cut.
Yeah, my thinking along that goes too. We just talked about how you kind of have to have your more content in more places, and you really need still like more people to make that happen, while the production side of things can be shortened a lot with AI, like some of these examples that we have here.
Yeah, like I said, again, it's a 1 + 1 = 3. It's not one is great, one is not great. I think we're seeing almost the full circle, journey when you think of like content writers. AI kind of came out in, we'll just call it the 1.0 version, and everybody decided that content writers weren't needed at all. And then what happened is everybody was just pumping out mediocre at best content, and it wasn't giving value to the users. It wasn't getting the results from search engines. So they went back, and it's like, okay, we need these content writers, not necessarily because we need them to write every single word, but they're doing the research. They understand what needs to be, covered, and then they can be the editors and they can, fact check it. And again, if you were normally tasked with 2 articles a week, now maybe you can do 5. I think that genuinely is a good example of not one or the other, but both providing value. And that's why I'm so aggressive in telling everybody at the top of my lungs that AI is not a silver bullet. It's a great resource.
Perfect. And there's a huge strategy component there. There's a lot that goes into like positioning as well. And at AirOps, we're firmly into the human in the loop, human review camp, to where, again, a person needs to make the strategic decisions about what gets published and what direction you're going in. So I think that's a great reminder. Trend number 6, a lot of conversation that I've been seeing online and in person about just how do we attribute SEO these days. It feels like a very messy game to start with, and now it feels even messier than it was before.
I can't agree with you anymore. I mean, I think attribution is amazing. I love my data more than anything. But let's just admit it, like as SEOs, most of us are probably, search marketers, content marketers. SEO being a free resource always gets screwed in attribution. And so we've been fighting it since day one. And now as we continue to get murkier and murkier data, whether it be, the Apple, devices, the cookies, the GDPR consents, like all that kind of stuff, all it does is it makes it hairier. So, and then let's just even add in too, a lot of us were measuring LLM traffic by the referral source. And ChatGPT and some of these other ones, they're not even consistently using UTM tags in their linking out. So I think what a lot of this is we need to set really good expectations for what we feel like we can measure reliably, and then, get buy-in for it. Because the days, like nobody should be doing like ranking reports, in my opinion, but like those days are gone. Like we really need to talk about revenue as being the top KPI. And then one thing that I've been working on is almost from like a paid media perspective is how are we looking at these initiatives almost as like campaigns? So when we create content that might be SEO focused, if you will, why aren't we taking some of the credit for when social media is distributing it and then they're getting all this traffic and their sales, when they are using it for email and they're pulling traffic and sales? Paid search is able to scale and bid on more terms because this content didn't exist. I'm not saying that this is all SEO or content that should take the credit, but I think we just need to better understand that as things get a little bit, or I should say not clear, it's like, I think there's just opportunities to do more cause and effect and have the channel not be the representation of what is success.
Not have the channel be the representation of success. I think that's a really great point, especially if it is being used on social, in newsletters, that sort of thing, because it doesn't really seem like all of the tools are really capturing that full value of modern SEO.
Absolutely. I think everybody can pull up their analytics right now, and the amount of direct traffic or not set is higher today than we have ever seen in previous years.
Yeah, and what do you attribute that to, or where is the not set traffic actually coming from, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, my personal opinion is I think some of it is organic. I think just like as Google is pulling back, it's like they are obviously trying to keep as much data as humanly possible.
Mm.
And then, I think Chris said in the comments, it's like there are affiliate browser plugins with, that are, rewriting your cookies, and there's so much to it. So, and part of it is just, you know, like as I mentioned before, ChatGPT doesn't always tag with UTM parameters. So that doesn't always show up as a referral source. Sometimes it shows up as direct. And I don't know about you, but when I'm seeing a bunch of direct traffic going to a blog post that's really nested into my client's site, I have a hard time believing that they, remembered, 70 characters and just jotted it down. It's like it's coming from somewhere.
That's so funny. I've literally heard that from an agency owner who ran like a similar test where he like made this very long URL, and then it said it was direct traffic coming to it, and he was like, that was just impossible. There was like no way. I think Mary has a great question here. We'll go ahead and address this now. Um, how are you like talking to your clients about attribution? How should agencies talk to their clients about attribution? Any suggestions there?
Yeah, I love this question because I think this is one of the biggest challenges for us right now. And the search professionals, or I'll just say marketing professionals that are going to find the most success in the near future are going to be the ones that can figure out how to have this conversation, because it genuinely is more about how can we align on KPIs and measurement strategies than it is trying to use, say, your traditional metrics to be able to exclusively say what is good and what is bad. So one thing that I'm trying to just call out here is I'm telling clients straight up, it's like anybody who's promising you results, anybody who's telling you that traffic is going to explode from SEO, like is full of it. And then you just kind of explain to them, and historically, I've got people that kind of were turned off by that. They want to be sold the dream. But now I'm getting more and more, C-suite people are just like, you know what, Nick, like we need to have bigger conversations to justify the spend. But it's so refreshing to have someone just kind of say, we don't know for sure. Nothing is a guarantee. It's just trying to preface, the investment, the opportunities. And then, like I said, it's more of a collaborative effort, which I realize is easier when you have existing clients than when you're trying to sell. But that I think is going to be a new flag, if you will. A lot of us that have to sell services, we know what red flags to run away from clients from. And then the other ones, a new one, like I said, is just going to be willing to sit down at the table with us and truly define what success looks like and match that to the levers that we as, agency or, freelancers can pull.
Yeah, I really like that. Like, what does success really look like in this environment for this particular company? Because as you noted, the checklist SEO era is over, where you just do like these 5 things and then your rankings like go up. It was always more than 5 things, to be clear to everybody. I think I actually saw something on LinkedIn. A person mentioned the Yoast CEO said something like, yeah, it's even more than a checklist on that type of thing too. I see all the questions coming in. Some of them we're going to save a little bit for later, but I want to touch on Ryan's question here. If everything is about branding and he's seeing lots of traffic loss from Google across the board, if it is about branding and visibility and less about clicks, any specific metrics or KPIs that should be tracked? I have a couple thoughts too, but of course, want to hear what you have to say, Nick.
Yeah, Josh, I think we can kind of riff on this one because I was just talking for like a good hour with a couple of people on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, earlier today. And it kind of goes back to impressions. I really don't like that as a KPI from like a digital marketing perspective. And most of us on this call know that it only takes one SERP shift or for you to get listed 2 or 3 times within, a collapsed box for your impressions to just skyrocket or literally fall off. But again, I think it's just more of your gold star should always be revenue. Like there's no situation where success is anything other than that. And then there's kind of what I deem secondary and tertiary, KPIs that are just kind of like these, if these are going in the right direction, that's a sign of success. And then hopefully the revenue will come up at the end. But honestly, it just comes down to what is that visibility? And I keep harping this idea of like I'm trying to really better understand how traditional PRs are measuring their success, and they don't do a very good job of it, but they will report on, estimated eyeballs. And we know the impressions obviously from Search Console. And I think to a certain extent that has to have a certain amount of value. Again, as a data dork myself, I want the attribution to tie directly to an effort, but this is a really, really, really good example of that halo effect that we talk about. We create good content, people are talking about us more, they may or may not link, they may just give us a citation, but per our other conversations earlier, all of that has different value, but it's not going to show up in the organic search channel. So, Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, especially since we just talked about how the attribution and even direct and all of that seems in not set is very difficult to track too. I've been tracking impressions for this quarter, and it's been really cool to see those like increase, even though the clicks have remained flat or a little bit down. So I agree on the impression front. And then I would also maybe suggest too that depending on your industry is that you really think about middle and bottom funnel content, because if your clicks are down, but your conversions are up, like nobody should like have a problem with that. And Kevin Indig just did a big study about AI overviews about just talking about how clicks are down. But if you are getting the right traffic, if people are kind of getting that what is content from the AI overviews, it's really an opportunity to focus on what makes your product different and what makes your industry different.
I agree with everything that you said, Josh. I want to jump in real quick because Ryan had a really good follow-up, and I'll just give my opinion. So he's just asking,
Yeah.
how do you keep paid teams from, attributing revenue and success to basically everything? Because a good paid team is going to be cooking the bejesus out of every user that comes in, reserve them as many ads as they can, and then they get the credit at the end. When we talked about attribution does not favor SEO, it's always going to go towards the paid mediums, because ultimately the better that looks, the more people are going to spend. And that's how Google and Meta and all these guys make their gazillions. And SEOs are, trying to get 1% of budget. But so either way, back to the main point. One thing that I did with one of my clients is we did a test where they had their blog that drove a fair amount of traffic. But when you do just that landing page attribution, the revenue was not sexy. Like it didn't even pay for the effort that we've been putting in. But we put together a way to cookie the users that are landing on the blog for the first time ever. And then that cookie is persistent. So when they leave the site and they get tracked, or sorry, they get remarketed by paid search and they come back and make a purchase, we then understand the revenue. Now, this is a robbing Peter to pay Paul when it comes to revenue, because the dollar is still a dollar. But when I went back to that idea of how are we looking at things more on the campaign level, paid search was able to cookie these users that had never been on our site before, get them back in as a second visit. Google Analytics at that point gives all the credit to paid. But we were then able to say, despite what GA4 attribution is saying, we know that this user who first came to our site from our marketing efforts is ultimately worth this much, which was actually like a 5x what the revenue we were reporting for, first or last touch attribution.
Wow, that's really impressive. Ryan, I think that was a really comprehensive answer. Once the recap goes out, you can like go and find this selection and review it for sure. Pump sites, that's quite good. Let's go to the next one, and then we'll have several questions here for the end too. Last but not least, I mean, this kind of is a great summary slide. SEO is a long game. I feel like we've been chatting about this in several different ways, but yeah, let's go ahead and add a little bit more to it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this has been the conversation that we have been having forever, is just SEO takes a long time. And I think the hot take here from me is now is the time more than ever before to let certain businesses know that SEO is not the solution. Everybody historically has always said SEO can provide some value, right? It's cheap, it's free, it's blah, 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 blah. But now we have companies that are brand new. They're in industries with SEO teams that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. That's not where you should start. I've had companies come to me and say, if I don't increase my revenue in the next 6 months, I'm going out of business. And I stop them immediately and say, SEO is not going to save you.
Mhm.
And I think so. Again, it's setting those expectations. It's being able to understand that this is going to take a long time to be able to show in, again, that attribution of organic search equals X dollars. Where I think we can see more value immediately is when we are creating the content, when we are making changes to pages, how is that impacting other channels? If I could, this is going to show you the breadth of knowledge that I don't have for paid search. But let's say all of our typical SEO on-page elements for a page can increase the quality score from a 6 to a 7. And that saves the paid team, 12 cents per click. Should an SEO kind of get some credit for that? We're not getting the clicks, we're not getting the revenue, but something that we are doing is helping them. And again, in a perfect world, we're not fighting one another. We are working for one team. And it's just having those type of conversations. So I know that's a little bit of a tirade, but I don't think we are getting away from SEO as a long game. If anything, I think the length is even expanding even more.
Yeah, that's a really good note, is it always was a long game. It was never free traffic, even if people like kind of have pegged it that way. So that's a really good note. And then I've always worked in small companies for the most part where like the content, the SEO versus paid like tension wasn't really there. So we were like sharing keyword lists. We're like working together. And I'm like, if I can get to #1 on this word or highly ranked, then I can like save some dollars on that. So, I mean, having those conversations are always really important, I think.
Yeah, and Josh, I'll say one thing. When I was on the agency side, and to a smaller extent now, like agencies typically don't play well together, and I hate that.
Mm,
But that's where I think it's really empowering. Like for your point of contact that probably oversees both of those relationships, like they own the data. So it's like, don't allow your partners to bully you into, I'm not going to work with these people, or it's proprietary paid, data. I'm not giving it to search. Like, no, like that is not a thing. And I think that is part of the client's responsibility, and a good partner will advocate for that as well.
yeah, that's a really good note for sure. Let me go to the next one here. Oh, bonus. What content marketers should know about technical SEO? I really liked everybody, you got a bonus trend. 90% of SEO is content strategy and 10% is SEO technical work.
I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, the very first thing that you guys need to know is, and you have it right here, it's like, how is your content able to be discovered? Because it doesn't matter how amazing your content is. If your blog is blocked, or you are serving it up with some advanced JavaScript that, is proprietary to your company and Google's never seen it before, you're not even able to start at the starting line with Google. So
Right.
I do think that, and a lot of it is, you don't necessarily have to have the full solution on how to fix it. What you have to be able to do is have enough knowledge to like identify it and bring it to somebody or a team. In fact, I will tell you more times than not, I have never had like a developer who appreciates me telling them how to fix it. Bring it to them and say, this is the issue. Here is how, why it matters. Can you help me come up with a solution? So I think that is a big one from, just again, structure of the site, crawlability, and then you put in here too, structured data. There's a big debate going on in the SEO world of like, is it valuable or are we just training Google? And I would argue anything that's kind of an on-page component, we should be erring in over-investing in it, because I think it's only going to help us, whether it's from Google or any of these other tools, or sorry, the other, resources, the LLMs and whatnot. And then last but not least, it goes back to the basics, knowing that we are not optimizing exclusively for Google anymore. It's like, have your headers, have your internal links, have, the widgets that link everywhere else. These are all things that I would have put less of a priority on when I'm strictly looking at it from an SEO perspective. But now I'm going through and assuming that the level of effort matches what the anticipated return on investment is, I'm prioritizing it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for sure. We're going to get to our Q&A here in 1 second. I wanted to share a bit about AirOps. I wanted to show this workflow that we're currently working on. Here, article content refresh. So what I have here is an example from masterclass. And what I did is, this is a really great way to show how you can update and refresh content, especially after you've already like built it. And so we've started working on what we're calling power steps. And you can even do this competitive gap analysis for an article. And so what you here see on the right is one version of the article. And then over here, some of the suggested content improvements. So here's a proposed improvement. And then here's another one down here. And what to keep in mind here is these are only suggestions for what you can do to improve your content. I still need to go through here and think about holistically what I'm trying to get at with this article. And then I can go through here and accept or reject these different points of the piece here. So we've seen a lot of good clients, like I mentioned Webflow earlier, and Descript has had a lot of success with their content refresh. And here at AirOps, this is one of the things you can do. You can put all of your articles in a grid, do this competitive gap analysis, and then you can kind of like approve, disapprove, reject, accept some, reject others, all the way through. We call these power steps, and you can do this in 1 step, but I wanted to show the behind the scenes of the power step here. So what really separates AirOps apart from, say, like ChatGPT is all these different customizations that you can have. So you can scrape the web page, extract the headers, get the URLs. And then with our new Power Step functionality, you can do all of this in just a few clicks of a button. But then you can also go back and like customize as well. So really great resource that we have. We're bringing out some new ones for AEOs in the next few weeks. So very exciting times here at AirOps. Again, AI is not a silver bullet. It's definitely a tool. And these are one of the things that you can have in your tool set to use. So if you're interested, let us know. I know we'll be dropping the link in the chat here. And let me reshare my screen a bit. Let me get that up for you. Yeah, here's the example from Descript. You can find this on our site. 35% increase in signups with 123% organic traffic growth. Here are some of the tools that we use, including all the major LLMs and our integration partners. And so we are offering these exclusive refresh strategy sessions. So you can email us at team@airops.com or click on that QR code and we will show you the exact workflows that you can use that I just showed you for masterclass that you could also use for your own instance as well. All right, so now we're going to do a Q&A. Let me get all my questions back up here. Nick, do you have some of let me see if I have the Q&A up here.
Yeah, I just pulled up a couple. I think if I hit answer live, hopefully it won't make it go away. So Trevor's question is, any suggestions on LLM.txt files? And so I don't have a ton of experience with it yet because I've kind of taken the approach of what I want search engines to see is also what I want, these LLMs to have. However, I did see, I think it was from Barry Adams on a social channel, there are certain resources that we are intentionally blocking from Google because we know that it hogs their resources and, crawl budgets. So what he had was basically lines in the existing robots.txt file that just said kind of like mass allow everything for these particular LLM bots. And I thought that was pretty ingenious. But I think this is a bigger conversation and a lot more, because I've also had conversations with people that are basically cloaking a version of the website that's stripping out everything but the raw content and serving it just to LLM bots. And that is with the idea of just like optimizing, your resources and budgets and stuff. What do you think, Josh? You got a strong opinion on that?
I honestly am doing my research still on all of that and how it impacts me. So I think that's a really great answer. Thanks. One I like here from Intellica is, do you think there will be an increase in Microsoft Bing? I kind of referenced this earlier with their partnership with ChatGPT and OpenAI. Is there anything that we need to do differently for that type of content, in your opinion?
Yeah, I kind of paused because I feel like it makes sense. Like all the signs point to yes, but it really reminds me of kind of old school SEO. 9 out of 10 times, anything you're doing for Google is good for Bing. The days of like, I remember, links used to be even bigger for Bing, and you could just spam the bejesus out of your site and do well in Bing. I think it's something just to continue to monitor. And the one thing that I will say is Google has been a little bit more transparent about what markup they do or don't rely on. And people are quick to remove that markup from their site, not realizing that, again, Microsoft, Bing, any other engine isn't always in that position too. So I would just make sure that any conversation you're having about we're doing this for Google has the secondary thought of just like, how would this impact an LLM or Bing or any other search engine?
Yeah, I think that's always good to remember. Is it doesn't seem fundamentally different in my opinion, like a LinkedIn post versus like an article. But I like that 9 out of 10 idea, is that 9 out of 10 times it's kind of the same motion that you'll need to be using there. Meg, let me get to your question here. Do you have any advice in breaking down silos between PR and SEO teams? I have a few thoughts there, but Nick, if you have anything.
So as a consultant that comes in and oftentimes are working with existing SEO teams, I'm going to kind of use that situation as well. I think the first thing that you got to do is, nobody appreciates somebody coming to them and trying to tell them how to do their job. So it's just setting the expectations of like, hey, I'm here to learn what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then listen. And then at the end, it's like, you can be like, hey, what about this opportunity? And one really good example I will give you, my last agency job before I went out on my own, we had a PR team. And I remember going over to her, and the lead, and I just said, hey, can we find a time for 20-minute conversation? I just want to know your process. And she walked through it. Most of it was above my head. But I recognized when they were linking in their posts, they were using a bit.ly link. And I just said at the end, I was just like, hey, just out of curiosity, is there a reason you use bit.ly? And they were like, yeah, we want to track our clicks. And it's like, cool, that makes sense. I was like, are you aware that you could do that in Google Analytics? And she's like, no one's ever told us that. And I said, interesting, because what you don't know, and again, you don't want to go super technical and dorky on it, but it's like a bit.ly link is going to go through a redirect and are typically no followed. So there is 0 SEO value there. You're telling me that you can have, a naked link or a regular link, if you will, a follow link, and you just need the means to be able to track it. Like, let me help establish a new process within your broader SOP that provides value to my team and to the client. And, so basically, long story short, I'm saying is, don't go in as a wrecking ball trying to change everything they're doing. I would try to better understand how they work and just see where there's commonalities, because you'll be really surprised at how much both of your efforts and goals actually align.
I love that like very practical example of just like where you need a conversation to really just like meet in the middle there and like find that common ground. That's great. I might just tag on there, maybe more from a content perspective, is it's really good to work on, like we've been talking about like research reports and such. Those new data helps you with like LLMs, and you need data, I would say, for a lot of your articles and such too. So that's a great partner to have with your PR team, is to collaborate on like what's a new report that we can do or something like that. The other thing too is just finding the experts together, maybe working, sometimes PR teams use their subject matter experts. Sometimes they find an outside expert for you too. So that would be another way to work together. And then I really think about it as like topic clusters too. So if there is, going back to that campaign idea, if you have a big theme for the quarter, like what are your SEO posts? What are your PR posts? How do you like link those things together? Do you get some earned media outside on a different site? You can start interlinking, use that as an external link. So then that will help your brand mentions like overall rise, and also help your awareness in LLMs. So think a little bit more like comprehensively, I would suggest on how you can really collaborate on campaigns and what you're trying to put out to the market. Well, we're right at time. Maybe we can do, we kind of talked about LLMs a bit. Any other questions here?
I think one that would just be interesting real quick, Josh, is someone had mentioned basically, is it worthwhile to work with a company to invest in SEO with AI? I think the answer is yes, with an asterisk. I think this is a really good opportunity for you to kind of grill an SEO partner for what they know about AI, and that you can kind of use that as a barometer of how quickly they pivot and understand the industry. And then again, it's just setting proper expectations and knowing that what you're investing, is it right sized for what the potential rewards are. And like I said, sometimes it's clearly no, but there's lots of opportunity for many.
Yeah, that is a great note to end on. Thanks so much, Nick. You can follow him in all the places on LinkedIn and on Twitter/X. And again, look up, is it SEOforlunch.com? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, SEOforlunch.com. It was maybe lunchtime where you are right now. Great thing to read for that. I'm definitely a subscriber. And we have some resources in the chat too for AirOps. Feel free to email us at team@airops.com if you'd like a strategy session too. Nick, such a pleasure. Good to connect.
Yeah, Josh, thank you so much for the invite. It was fun today.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.